right, so we'll get started. First, I want to thank you all for being here and covering this. We had a pretty devastating fire at the Cedar-Lee-Meadowbrook project over the weekend, and so we just wanted to provide a bit of an opportunity to give some information about that fire, about the development, and offer an opportunity for any questions that we hopefully we'll be able to answer. It is early yet in this process, so there may be questions to which we do not have answers yet, but we're going to do our best. Before we get started, I did want to express some thanks to the cities of Shaker Heights, University Heights, Beechwood, the city of Cleveland, South Euclid, Warrensville Heights, Maple Heights, Lyndhurst, Richmond Heights, Highland Heights, Euclid, Mayfield Heights, Mayfield Village, Willoughby Hills, Orange Village, and Pepper Pike for coming to our aid during what was an immense fire in a massive development in our city. That kind of mutual aid, I think, needs to be lauded. The effort that those cities and their fire service brought to the city of Cleveland Heights was tremendous. And we appreciate that here in the city. Both I speak for residents and staff alike. That we have a great deal of gratitude to the help that was provided. I'd also like to thank a couple other agencies and organizations that provided support, including Cuyahoga County Emergency Management. The Cuyahoga County Fire Chiefs Association providing the Cuyahoga County Fire Mobile Command Vehicle, the American Red Cross who came when called, the Hillcrest Heights Regional Fire Investigation Unit, and I'd like to take a moment as well, specifically to call out a couple people who provided support. So Lyndhurst Fire Chief Carroll, who brought over the Fire Mobile Command Vehicle with assistance and managed that process in support of this effort. I'd like to thank Battalion Chief Keene, Pat Keene, as well, specifically. He was the incident commander during this process and spent almost the entire time working hard to manage what was an extremely complicated firefighting effort and kept people safe and effectively managed that firefighting effort in a way that resulted in no reported injuries and no spread of this fire from the initial building where the fire was located. So I want to thank B.C. Keene for his work on this process as well. We're going to talk about a few things in this conference. One is the firefighting effort itself, that process and how that went. We are going to have a brief discussion about the investigation process and the progress that we've made thus far and the process moving forward. And then I'd like to give a little bit of time to talk about the rebuilding that we are going to be engaging in moving forward once we get through the initial process of investigating and working through how this occurred in the first place. Right now, I would like to ask all of you, we've got a couple different speakers here, and I'd like for questions to be held off until we get through the comments that each of them will be making to you today, and we'll open up questions toward the end of this process. For now, I would like to introduce Chief Jim Harry, Fire Chief Jim Harry, to provide our initial progress and the process of fighting this fire. Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, folks. I'm Chief Jim Harry from the Cleveland Heights Fire Department. I have a brief statement. At approximately 7:05 p.m. on Friday, January 24th, our fire crews responded to a building under construction near Cedar and Lee Roads. The crews encountered a heavy body of fire that had already entered the roof and ceiling spaces. The crews faced an extremely complex fire problem made even more difficult by the freezing temperatures. The fire burned heavily from our arrival on scene until well into the next day. Crews did have to stay on scene to extinguish hot spots into the next night. Through very hard work by our people, along with assistance from many mutual aid companies, the fire was thankfully contained to a single building on the complex. Thankfully, there were no safety or assisting agency personnel seriously injured. The scene is still an active emergency scene, and the cause of the fire is under investigation. Our fire investigation unit is working alongside of the Ohio Fire Marshal's Office on this issue. The logistics involved in bringing this fire under control were massive, but every single person who was called on met the challenge. Our community is very resilient, and we will recover from this incident. Thank you for your attention. I'll turn it over to our lead fire investigator, Thomas Beers.
Good afternoon. Do you need to adjust your cameras?
Just spell your name, please.
I was just going to, it's Thomas, Thomas. Last name is Beers, Beers, just like a six-pack on the weekend. I have been assigned as the primary investigator on this fire. However, behind me is a contingent of highly skilled, educated, trained professionals, both from the Fire Investigation Unit, which is a task force comprised of investigators from the fire department as well as the police department. Additionally, we've called on resources from the Hillcrest Heights Regional Fire Investigation Unit. And as of yesterday, we've brought in our team members and partners from the State Fire Marshal's Office as well as the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. As far as the investigation process right now, as you can imagine, being an extremely large building. However, regardless of the size of the building itself, we just had this discussion whether it's a garage that catches on fire or a residential structure in any community here in the United States or specifically in our community. We tackle that from the same approach. We use a scientific, forensic-minded approach to the fire itself. The size of the building is merely a distraction. As long as we follow the scientific methodology that has been assigned to us using the standards that all of our investigators, both on the fire and law enforcement side, work with. We will continue to seek answers not just for those that have a financial or work-related interest in the property, but also to bring some reassurance to the citizens themselves that the community will remain safe. Just to give you a background on how we do fire investigations in general, we never come into it with the idea that it is intentionally set or accidental. We come in very blindly and allow the facts of the case speak for themselves. Again, using laws of thermodynamics, heat transfers, very scientific, boring, forensically principled concepts. We take all of the evidence into its totality, and then that includes collecting data such as interviews, eyewitness reports, tips from the citizens, things they may have noticed or smelled prior to the fire, as well as taking documentation during the fire process. We were fortunate enough to have our investigators on scene relatively quickly. And again, not unheard of, our investigators were present during the fire suppression operations that Chief Harry just mentioned. And that's, at that moment, we're really beginning our data collection processes. But from there, we make a determination as to which way the investigation will lean, on a civil side or a criminal side. But it really is the totality of that evidence as it presents to us that we will find by either act or omission, intentional or unintentional, how the fire started and progressed through the building. As far as a timeline on those events, each fire itself is uniquely different from one another. Obviously, I mentioned earlier that is a large-sized building, as Chief Harry and Mayor Seren both mentioned. We are playing against elements such as cold, wind, ice, water, and just a general cold. The investigation is progressing in a very timely and efficient manner so that we can get some answers for everyone from the community. So please bear with us as we continue our investigation. We'll be working very closely with Chief Harry and Mayor Seren, as well as the city's communications department to make sure that any answers that you need or require in the next couple of days or weeks that we provide those to you in a very timely manner. So thank you very much.
So before I bring up our chief building official, Eric Elmy, I would like to mention very briefly that there were a couple people that I didn't thank and a couple organizations that I didn't thank. And I did want to extend my gratitude as well to Cleveland Heights Police, who were on scene and assisted throughout the entire firefight and provided a great deal of assistance in making sure that the scene was secured, that we had resources coming to the scene in a way that was useful to the firefighters. And I also wanted to call out our Department of Public Works and Director Klingscale and our Department of Parks and Recreation and Director Andres Gonzalez for providing additional support as well. The firefighters worked almost 20 hours in freezing cold, handling these water lines, and in those conditions, it can be extremely difficult to maintain stability. And one of the things that we were able to do with assistance from Department of Public Works and Parks and Recreation was make sure that we had sufficient salt to keep those firefighters stable in the fight against this fire. And so I wanted to express my thanks as well to departments that came to our aid in that way too. So with no further ado, I'd like to bring our Chief Building Official, Eric Elmy, up to the lectern to discuss some of the building standards and some of the process related to building permitting and inspection that relate to this particular incident.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Eric Elmy. I'm the Chief Building Official. And in this situation, unfortunately, the building department has to issue a demolition order. The building, we were working on it, that was 75% almost done, and it sadly got burned. As we speak, we are doing our investigation to find out what happened. As soon as we find more information, we will notify you. You are more than welcome to communicate with us. And it is very sad. That's what I can say. Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to touch on rebuilding for a second. As you've heard, we have to go through a process. We need to investigate what caused this fire. We have to, in order to do that, we have to ensure that the site is safe enough for the investigation to continue. That may take a little bit of time as we bring in a structural engineer to ensure that we can go into the property. This is compounded by the fact that this is encased in ice at this point. We are in the dead of winter, and we've just unloaded millions of gallons of water into this structure. And so that presents a bit of a complication, but we are working through that, and we will ensure that the people investigating this fire are doing so in a safe, effective, but also efficient manner. As that investigation takes place, we will also allow the opportunity for all of the other interested parties to investigate as well. And we hope to have this done as quickly as possible. We don't have a definite timeline for you just yet, but as we progress, we will provide more information as it becomes a bit more cemented. Once that investigation has proceeded, we hope to very quickly move to demolish this property so that we can begin the rebuilding. And again, we don't have a specific timeline for you on that because so much of it is dependent on the investigation proceeding. However, I can state with absolute certainty that the city of Cleveland Heights is dedicated to rebuilding and dedicated to no unnecessary delay in the progress of that rebuild. And I can assure you, I've spoken with Darren Kintner at Flaherty & Collins, and they are fully on board as partners with the city in the completion of this phase of the Cedar-Lee-Meadowbrook or the Marquee project. We don't anticipate delaying the rebuild. We anticipate working through this investigation as quickly as possible with an eye toward completion in a comprehensive and effective way, but with efficiency as a goal as well in terms of how much time this takes, and then proceeding immediately to demolish this property and begin the rebuilding effort as quickly as possible. Flaherty & Collins, as our partner on this, is fully on board in moving forward, and we will see this project complete. I think I can open it up now for any questions that you may have. Make sure you let us know which of us you would prefer to address the question so that we can have somebody on board. We'll go this way, so you first, then you, then you.
This might either be for you or the building commissioner. Since this was an open construction site ongoing, were the construction gates shut or open at the time? Were there people there from the construction? And should there have been somebody, or was there somebody watching the site as security?
So I can speak based on the time that we estimate that this fire started. I don't believe that there were, okay, I'll turn it over to Investigator Thomas Beers to give you a complete answer instead of just riffing.
So if I heard your question correctly, it was, were there people on scene, whether workers, and what else? If you could rephrase
Were the
it.
gates supposed to be closed and locked at the time? Were there any evidence of them being open, and was somebody supposed to be watching?
So there is, those are all things that I mentioned, like the totality of evidence that we're looking at. Whether they were open or closed, we do know that there is internal security video footage from the area that would indicate or not indicate, or give us some idea of if someone was there. There are gates, obviously, around that construction property or that site, but digging through the statements from the various workers on scene. I mean, you have to understand, with something like this, you have electricians, HVAC, all of your normal utilities, not to mention, people that specialize in various components of the construction, flooring, ceilings, whatever, lighting, kitchens. So all of those individuals have to be interviewed. Then our investigative team collaborates with each other at night to go over those notes. So to re-answer your question, I don't have a definitive answer as to whether gates or security questions or being insecure at that time, what the status was. But that is one of the things that we obviously look at. Does that answer your question? Mm-hmm. Okay.
How much is the estimated rebuild going to cost, and where is that money going to come from?
All right, that's a great question, and that's going to be another one of those questions that we're going to have to sort out. In a general way, we can speak to the fact of insurance, allowing for some of the mitigation of the cost of rebuild. But that's a conversation that the city will have to have with Flaherty & Collins about what moves forward and how in terms of the funding. Our anticipation is that given Flaherty & Collins' dedication to completion on this project, this will not be a difficult conversation to have. It just may take some time to sort out exactly how that works. And this, may be a conversation that we have to have ongoing because of different contractors having different levels of insurance and sorting out what the investigation, what the evidence points to in terms of the cause of this may have an impact on how any rebuild gets paid for. And so we can't answer that question, but it's a complicated question to answer, and part of that answer will come from the investigation, what the evidence points to in terms of the cause of the fire. The total project was approximately a $66 million investment. Obviously, this portion of the project was not the complete project. It was a relatively large section of the project, so we anticipate that the cost will be relatively expensive, but we don't believe that it's out of reach to move forward and correct this, this issue and get over this hurdle toward completion of the full project.
I know that right now an investigation has to be completed before you can definitively answer this, but are there any primary indicators to determine if this was intentionally set, how the fire started, where it started, if accelerant was used, anything like that?
I'll give it back to Investigator Beers for any information that might be used.
At this time, we're not disclosing which way that we are leaning towards. Again, I think I talked a little bit about using a scientific methodology. By automatically thinking about intentional or unintentional just creates a confirmation bias. You know, we may end up looking at evidence a little bit differently. So we have to come in and look at it with just each individual piece as a data set, and then weigh those against other piece of data set or other piece of data. So we are not looking at it as, I'm not going to comment as to whether or not we are or are not looking at it as intentionally set or accidental either way, and I'm just not going to do that.
Just as an additional piece there, I do want to reassure everybody that we're not going to leave this press conference and go silent on you. As this progresses, we will be providing more information about our progress on the investigation, our progress on sort of costing out and moving forward with a rebuild and making sure that this project sees completion. We will not, go into our bunkers and not provide information as it comes up. We are interested in making sure that the public is fully informed about this progress as soon as we have information that we can provide. But I do want to reiterate the importance of coming to this with no biases, coming to this with no expectation of a particular result. That's how we tend to deal with investigations generally, and in this case, we've got some specific scientific ways to take the evidence into account as a holistic picture. So, where somebody might go in and say, well, based on this one piece of evidence, this sort of points toward this direction, but we need to take a look at that one piece of evidence in the context of every other piece of evidence before we can make that kind of conclusion or even preliminary conclusion.
Mr. Beard, if I may.
Yes, sir.
You spoke of forensics. What do your forensics tell you about where this started? It's a huge structure.
It is a huge structure. Our investigators are origin and cause investigators. Again, I'm not going to give any indication right now as to where where the origin of the fire was. I think we have a good handle on that, and we're making progress. As everyone's indicated so far, access to the building is an issue. It's pretty much an ice castle right now, and the overall safety of our investigation team and investigative partners on scene, we want to make sure that we approach this in a methodical process. And so I'm not going to disclose what our current working hypotheses are on the origin or on the causation at this time.
May I ask why?
I want to say that it's as the mayor indicated, it is tens of millions of dollars associated with this project. If it were to be to go either way, we've already taken statements from individuals, and I would not want to have anyone watching this press conference to make any insinuations based upon any of the statements I made and maybe alter what they've told us already, if that makes any sense.
I understand what you're saying, but I still don't understand as to why you're not disclosing what you know. The facts are the facts. They're not going to change, okay, that much. So, I mean, you want to make sure that there's full disclosure. We'd appreciate full disclosure.
It's an open investigation, sir.
Yeah, I got it. Please. Okay.
Sorry. This is an open investigation. We can't disclose. They're going to go through the process. We have a process that we go through for every fire. Every fire in Cleveland Heights gets investigated, and they're just not going to deviate from the process. Okay.
Well, I do want to address, we do have to weigh sort of our dedication to transparency and providing information that may unintentionally corrupt later, pieces of the investigation. So we are still in the process of interviewing people. We are still in the process of taking a look at the physical evidence. And in the absence of having a great deal more evidence than we have right now, what we don't want to do is provide any public statements that may skew, even unintentionally or unconsciously, any testimony or interview responses that may come later. So if we provide information, for instance, that we think right now, based on all available evidence, X is the case, we don't want somebody who is watching this right now, who may come in for an interview sometime this week, to hear that and have that influence the context within which they would be providing us information. We don't want people to hear information that we're providing today and have that make certain pieces of information less likely for them to think of when they're talking with us. We don't want to skew anybody's intention or anybody's expectations of this process, so that we can get the full picture from everybody that we talk to, and so that anybody who is working on this case continues to work on it with an open mind, because we really do want to go exactly where the evidence leads and not fall into the trap that people generally can fall into, even by mistake, in pursuing a particular course of investigation because of something that was said or thought early on. We have to keep an open mind if we're going to get to the correct answer.
I appreciate your candor.
Sure.
Mr. Mayor, just regarding the fire, so the eastern side of the building, the closest fire truck that could get there was sitting on the Wendy's parking lot. You're saying you want to rebuild as fast as possible. Are you going to rebuild the building the same way, or are you going to be looking at the fire plans to make sure that what was done is actually fire safe? Because obviously what happened here is not usual. Another thing, just regarding transparency, people in the city are still waiting on you guys to release the footage of the killing a few months ago, and
So I
really
appreciate.
trust the city on that kind of call.
Give me a second. Yeah, so first of all, I would like to say that we have released all of the body cam footage from the Christian Tyson Thomas incident. So I did want to at least correct the record on that. But in any case, both to BCI immediately unredacted, and then also redacted as per our obligations under the law to whoever requested it, including the family and their attorney. So all of that footage has been released, and so that, just to make sure that we're on the same page there. In this case, though, this is sincerely a question of, do we inhibit an investigation in getting to the facts of a case, or do we jump the gun and start providing fuel for a rumor mill or those sorts of things? We don't want to do that. We recognize that in the absence of specific information, it can be very easy for people to fill in the gaps with speculation, with theories that may or may not be borne out by the facts. We want to make sure that our role is investigating the incident in a clear way, using methods that are time-tested. I have the utmost faith in our fire investigation unit and our fire service on this. And I believe that eventually we will get to the facts about what happened. In the interim, we don't want to skew any investigation responses. We don't want to even skew our own approach to investigating this fire through the, I would say, premature release of something that may or may not point in a particular direction when seen on its own, but not when seen in the holistic context of the fire investigation. So that's why we're being a little bit cautious about this. But it is our goal to, this will all be public record, I'm sure, and moving forward. When it comes to your first question, though, about any adjustments to the design, I think we're...
Also the walkability of the neighborhood and such, and like there is no access from that side of the building.
Well, I think that's sort of a conversation that we'll have to have with Flaherty and Collins, our development partner. The city of Cleveland Heights is not building this building. And so, in those cases, we have to work with our development partners, and, we can have that conversation. But I think that I would like to turn it back over to Chief Harry to provide a little bit more information and context and insight about the access to a structure, any structure that might find itself on fire, and how the fire service protects against that, and what might need to happen
And
for.
right before you do that, just if you said the city of Cleveland Heights is not building the building, that means that the city taxpayers will not be subsidizing this rebuild?
Well, for one, when it comes to sort of a financing of a rebuild, I can't speak to the specifics of that. However, I can say that I don't believe that there's any expectation that the taxpayers of Cleveland Heights or the city as a government will be funding a rebuild. But I'm going to turn it back over to Chief Harry to provide a little bit more context about your question related to access to any particular site, potentially including this one as a new build.
I'd like to address your statement that the building was unsafe initially. We have no evidence that would state that it was unsafe. It was under construction. The building was intended to be fully sprinkler protected due to the weather conditions outside and them not having central heating in there in place yet. The sprinkler system was not up and running. That contributes to the safety problem that we were met with when they arrived on scene. Eric could address a little bit more of that. A building under construction offers difficulty when you arrive on scene. A lot of times barriers to fire progression are not in place. As I said, the sprinkler systems, sometimes the wall coverings, things like that. We have nothing that says to us right now that there was anything unsafe about the building. Okay. Sure.
Within the Division of Fire and EMS that Chief Harry heads, not only do we have the Fire Investigation Unit, but we also have the Fire Prevention Bureau. And we've been working very closely with our fire inspector, who has been in and out of that property, I would argue more than, and all these properties have been under construction for the past several years, in and out of those properties more than probably any other city employee, and is in regular communications with all the line firefighter personnel on a daily and sometimes even weekly basis, giving us status updates. So from an investigative process, there was no indication that there was anything untoward or unsafe in the building. And just for clarity, Chief Harry had mentioned that the fire sprinklers were off. I don't want anyone walking away thinking that they were turned off. They were not required to be turned on in an unoccupied structure. So it wasn't as if they were turned off for the night and that is some liability on someone. They had not passed any, they were not to the point of where they needed to be turned on for occupancy, nor were they at that point of construction where they were required to have a full inspection of that fire prevention system, which is required before anyone occupies that building. And that is done by our wonderful fire inspector for the City Fire Prevention Officer, Jim Streb.
Just bounce off on that real quick. Does that also include the firewalls? When you talk about that building was not deemed unsafe, do you also take a look at firewalls and whether they were adequate during construction, and were they?
The firewalls are installed. The engineers and the architect designed the buildings according to Ohio building codes. Once the plans are drawn, they submit to the building department, any city actually in Ohio. Then the plans examiners, who are also engineers or architects, will review those plans to make sure those plans are meeting the Ohio building codes. As far as the drawings and plans, nothing was inside that was against the code. It met all the requirements for the Ohio building codes. However, again, as was mentioned before, the building was under construction. During the construction, we don't have a sprinkler system on. If we put the water into the pipes with that cold weather temperature, the pipes will bust, as simple as it is. So it is unfortunate, again, 75% of the building was done, and then we found ourselves with the burned building. I was myself with many other staff here on Friday night, And again, on Saturday and Sunday, we were talking with the fire inspectors, fire investigators, everybody that will do the investigation, of course, on this scenario. And again, more information we'll find, we will notify you as soon as we get the information.
Chief
Thank
Aaron,
you.
if I may ask you
Yes, sir.
one question. What will be done to make sure this doesn't happen again in terms of possible access, anything that may have been learned from this incident, any security upgrade, anything like that to forestall something like this possibly happening again?
I haven't seen anything that would tell me that this was it's a large-scale event, not something we see every day, certainly not in this city or any city. You see periodically across the country here and there. I don't see anything that says to me that there was any safety issue or anything that could or should have been done better yet. Always open to keep looking. We're still gathering information. As far as the safety of the property now, it is still, like I said, an active emergency scene. We're waiting, we're in a holding pattern for the structural engineers. They're going to decide how we go forward, where the barriers are going to be, and pertaining to the walkability of the area and traffic patterns.
Actually, if I could provide a little bit more to that too, I want to assure people that, again, we're going to be taking this step by step. And we can't reliably or conveniently select any potential modifications to plans or anything like that until we have an understanding of how this incident began. We can't find a proactive solution if we don't know exactly what the problem was. And so that's the first step, is doing this investigation, making sure that we have all the facts that we can reliably receive from this site and from the interviews. And moving from there, once we have facts in hand, we can take a look at if there is anything that could have been done differently or that we should take into account as we rebuild. But I want to assure people as well, because there's been a little bit of confusion about this. Many of the fire prevention efforts that are found in a building are in those elements of that building that are placed in anticipation of and directly in advance of occupation of that building. So when we're talking about drywall that is fire rated, that can help slow down fires, we're talking about an operational sprinkler system that needs to exist within a structure that has heat, so that in a 15-degree day, that sprinkler system doesn't have water that freezes and bursts the pipes. So those sorts of things, again, I want to reiterate, occur closer to occupation of that building. And so I want to make sure, the other phase of this project is, people are moving in right now. And I want to assure people of the safety of that. We've inspected that building. We have taken a look at the safety of that building already. And so I want to assure people that this is a particular incident that was able to occur because of its particular status in construction. And so I want to make sure that people recognize the difference between that occupied building and this building under construction. And then as we continue to gather evidence and the investigation continues to bring people in for interviews, that will inform what our next steps are. But again, I'd like to reiterate that we are fully dedicated to rebuilding with, not with haste, but with speed, with efficiency. And so we know that we have to get through this process as quickly as possible without sacrificing the quality of the investigation, so that we can move on to demolishing the property and move on to rebuilding the project.
At the time of the development agreement, Flaherty and County, was it a guarantee of completion? I mean, were they on the hook for completion of this project? And
So,
how does this affect it?
So the first thing I'd like to say, and I spoke with Darren Kentner at Flaherty and Collins earlier today, and we are both, as partners, fully on board with ensuring completion of this project. They have committed to completing this project, and we fully anticipate that they will do so. And so I don't think that will be a question, contractual or otherwise. We've been assured, and I think I'm looking forward to that next step, but I know that we've got to get through these steps first before we get there.
Has city architecture been contacted yet?
So I've had some conversation with Mr. Pesta at City Architecture, not necessarily substantive conversation yet, but we will get there.
I heard from some neighbors around there that this was the building, they have retail on the one that's people are moving into now. This was the building that had, I believe, to have had more amenities.
So based on the plans of this project, the building that is further south and has frontage on Lee Road is the building that contained on the first floor retail with residential above. The building that was on the Cedar side contained more residential units and amenities supporting the project and was the larger of the two buildings. So that speaks to the sort of the differences between those two aspects of the project.
And at 75%, how far along were they on? There was a pool, but it was outdoors, wasn't it?
Yeah, there was an outdoor pool in the plans.
And that wasn't started yet.
The smaller building, I think, finished in January. The smaller building, the smaller project, the south side is being accomplished entirely.
And people are already started.
So unfortunately, this building on the Cedar side.
You can come up.
As I was explaining, the smaller building on the south side was done at the beginning of the January. Unfortunately, the building on the Cedar side, which was 75% done, we were so looking forward to it, but it didn't happen. So,
Did that have a spa in it? And do you have the breakdown on the number of units in the one that was still under construction?
which one? The Cedar.
building that burned, how many units were in that?
I can give you later on the number of exactly the.
Thank you for your access. We all have deadlines we need to get to.
Mayor,
Okay,
I have a
thank you.
I have a quick
got a couple
question. Can
questions,
you
okay.
confirm there were ice raids in the Cleveland Heights area, specifically at the Cilantro and Coventry? Were you made aware ahead of time by ICE, and what was the outcome?
So, first, we've received unofficial, informal reports from residents that there was some sort of operation where people were taken into custody by federal agencies at Cilantro Taqueria on Euclid Heights Boulevard in the Coventry Business District. We do not have specifics. I can say that we were not informed ahead of time of this operation. We were not provided information by the federal government either prior to or subsequent to this taking place. We are still working to get confirmation of exactly what happened. We have reached out to the federal government, Homeland Security, and we have been told that we are not going to receive information about this incident from them. So right now, we are still seeking more information about that incident, but no, we were not involved, we were not informed, and at this point, we don't have concrete information about what occurred.
Thank you.
Have you talked to business owners that were involved with that raid?
So we're reaching out, but we haven't, I think at this point, received information back from the business owners in that location. We would like to get some more information so that we can have a clear understanding about what occurred and why. And we are working through potentially other channels, whether it's freedom of information, to try to get information from the federal government as well.
But have you heard anything from other cilantros in other communities? Were they raided also?
We have not heard anything of the kind.
was yesterday, that was Sunday.
Are there any other questions?
Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you all for coming, and please be on the lookout for more information as we get it.